Hey, Coach Sean. It's Fred Downey. Just wanted to reach out and thank you for your video post. I very much enjoyed it. I have a couple really good friends that live out in the areas that you live. One from Wisconsin. His mom used to live on the Twin Sister Lakes on the isthmus between the two lakes, and just outside of Madison. And my other buddy. Yeah, is in full protest regalia against ICE in Minnesota. He's a photographer for Wackenhut. Anyhow, so I definitely admire your coaching. Some similarities that we have. We're both. I'm no longer a high school coach at this point, but I've been a high school coach on and off for the last 10 years. Um, Similar to you, and also a club coach. Um, and On my club side, my early club, first club that I coached at, we were in a farm community in San Diego County where a lot of undocumented aliens and undocumented kids in the area that we live in, a lot of citrus, floral, a lot of growing fields for um, decorative plants and so forth, and then and a lot of avocados, a lot of avocados. So I had a situation where one of my players had broke their collarbone during a state cup game, and you know, it, parents weren't there, so I had to take care of everything because the parents were, afraid to travel and drive because the location for the game was about 5 hours away, and they just didn't want to risk being pulled over by border patrol or whatnot. So the kid Luis, drove. I took him up to the game, and during the game he broke his collarbone, and he got ambulance off the night after the game ended. My wife went with him, and then I went to the hospital and did you know help with the filling out documents and all that type of stuff. Um, and we thought, because the governing body, Cal South, that we played under at that time, had, you know, you had to buy insurance from them. So we thought, okay, well, he doesn't have insurance, but he has this, insurance through the playing fees that Cal South has. Um, well, ended up being a pretty substantial bill between the hospital and the ambulance and so forth. So, and treatment, and it ended up that Cal South, the insurance company, declined to pay. So I kind of went out on a limb and reached out both to the insurance company and then to ended up driving up to a Cal South meeting up in LA, which is a few hours from San Diego because of traffic, and talked to Derek Barretta, who was on their board of directors. He was the gentleman that was under his committee the insurance fell under, and Derek ended up becoming the president of Cal South at one point, and really leaned into him as to, well, this kid was forced to pay fees. Insurance declined because he was illegal. Um, if this kid was, from didn't have insurance, and if he was a natural citizen, would have, would the insurance company have paid? And the answer was yes. And so that's like discriminatory because bottom line, the person paid. And so if you pay for something, the expectation is that you receive the benefit. And so it's almost like fraudulent, if not fraudulent. We didn't go so far as to get an attorney involved, but it still doesn't sit well with me. And I've mentioned this, story only because, you're also working with, you know, uh, a group of individuals that, may be documented, may not be undocumented, and so forth. And I commend you for that. It brings its own unique set of challenges, and you have to be an advocate for these folks because they may not be familiar with the system or whatnot. I also can relate with the birth certificate situation. My mom, uh, she was born in Guatemala, and she was picking cotton, not cotton, coffee at a very young age, working on a plantation, and ended up being adopted by the Prussian family that owned the plantation, and that was kind of like winning the lottery for her. And without them, she would never would have had a pathway to meet my dad and move to the United States, and I wouldn't be talking via video to you right now. So we're very grateful for them. But there was you know, and a lot of third world, even second world countries, you might be born, like my mom was born on a dirt floor in a hut. There's not, a paperwork that's readily available like you have in, more first world countries where you're born at a hospital and all the paperwork is done for you and all that type of stuff. So I can definitely relate to the challenge. You know, so um, you one of the things that I would be kind of curious that you didn't mention in your video presentation, which I liked the graphics and how you had the wording for those that are maybe hearing impaired. I thought that was pretty slick, um, and good on you on that. Um, I wasn't quite sure. You mentioned a little bit that you played collegiately. Would have been interested in learning a little bit more about that and from you, and then how that maybe have translated to your love of coaching the game and maybe your license pathway. Um, with respect to the other ethical issues that you raised, um, which were the treatment by FIFA or host countries against either individuals, coaches, or players from those countries. I think you mentioned both Iran and Ecuador, and so I'm going to address each one of those kind of in a different way. Okay. So on the Iranian thing, I think that, sports is like going out to dinner in a weird way, is my analogy. I find that by sitting down and having dinner with somebody that you're trying to meet is a great way to share culture, break bread together, right? And sports is a similar way. And I think there was a huge missed opportunity from for the United States to show compassion to the players, a solidarity in sport that transcends the political or the war or whatnot. How you treat people, when you're hosting them, says mountains about your character. And I think that all we did was play into the narrative of the great Satan. Um, and though I'm a very conservative person and vote conservatively, I do also recognize that there's times that you need to be flexible in your dogma, and I think this was a huge missed opportunity. I think you're very right in raising that point as an ethical thing. Then you also mentioned the Ecuadorian, and um, I was my take on the Ecuadorian thing may be completely different from maybe something that you read or whatnot. My thing with the Ecuadorian was the host country, Mexico, treatment the night before the game. That the fans of Mexico who have um, at one level, I'm not a fan of the fans because of their derogatory slurs that they say during games that FIFA had to get involved with and threaten and so forth. That their fan base is obviously not all fans, but there's a segment of their fan base that's very vile, um, and the fact that they were outside the Ecuadorian hotel, banging drums, making a ruckus, disturbing the ability for and distracting the national team, Ecuadorian national team, you know, was not sporting, and I was just, it just wasn't sporting. I don't seem to recall at other World Cups, and maybe I just didn't catch it, that type of behavior by the host nation against an opponent prior to the game. You know, hooting and hollering during the game, absolutely acceptable as long as it's not derogatory or discriminatory. Um, yeah, I don't know. It didn't sit right with me with what they did the night before the game. Anyhow, I definitely appreciated everything about your introduction, and I think you are doing very right by the kids that you're coaching, and I absolutely support you 100%. And if you would reach out to me offline, because there's a nonprofit that I'm involved in that might be able to help some of these guys. All right, take care.